Welcome back to our 1+1 series. And today we're going to tackle the topic of what does it look like for married people to live in community? And like we said in our last series, there's so many false expectations, myths, and even really good things that we have seen within our experience in ministry that has either hurt or really excelled and helped building community. What have you seen? What have you experienced? Like, what are your feelings? Just kind of talk about what you feel, marriage has affected it negatively or even positively.
Oh yeah, I'll start us off. There's a false expectation that married people need community less because they're in marriage, like there's someone to take care of them. That expectation is really toxic. I mean, we just went through this pandemic where we saw domestic, intimate partner violence on the rise. And that's just intimate partner violence on the rise. You know, like all of our elected officials were talking to that, and all of us grieved with those in marriages where they were silenced, essentially, by that. And then there's the silence of like shame. What if your partner is unfaithful? Like, who do you talk to about that? Married people can be some of the most lonely people on the face of this planet because everyone assumes they're cared for, and therefore no one reaches out to them. Right? And so we need community outside of our marriages to speak to that. And I think on our end, for us to realize that even married people need community gives us a sense of urgency as to like how much community we have to build. Because a lot of times we take all the married people and we say, oh, they're taken care of. And then so we look at everyone else in our society and say, only they need community. But the reality is that's not true. And if that's not true, then we have such a population in need of community here in Elmhurst, in our neighborhood. Who's taking care of that? Who's going to be part of catalyzing communities that reach out to all of those individuals, all of those couples to bring them into community? That urgency is there.
You know, I think it's so true, and I think this is a fault of mine. As a single man, like I don't feel comfortable bothering, a married couple. And I think I even fall into that. Like I even perpetuate it by saying, oh, you're married, so you must be your own community. And I actually feel like I feel bad, like bothering, So even like I myself like fall into that category, even though of course I know married people need community. I think in my mind, I'm thinking everyone needs community, but I'm also perpetuating this myth, because I'm going, oh, you must be left alone. So this way I don't bother you. Yeah.
Now to add on to what Dave said, as a married person, sometimes we put a lot of weight, we put our everything into our spouse. Like we depend so much on them that when they disappoint us, it completely crushes us. And when we're in that state of being crushed, our spirit doesn't know who to turn to because the person that we normally turn to has disappointed us or has failed us. We feel completely alone. And I completely understand what you're trying to say there, which is why we really do need others. Doesn't matter what the relationship status is, we do need others to speak to share these concerns with, to share this sorrow with. Because if we put all our eggs in one basket and that person who carries our everything, all of our hopes and dreams, when they disappoint, it can be really death-defying.
That's so good. Yeah.
When Lester was sharing, as a single man, he sometimes feels bad to be a burden to others, like pulling the married couple aside and spending their time. I think sharing that gives us a better understanding of where single people are coming from, because a lot of these things are hidden, and we feel shy to talk about them because we don't want to offend, we don't want to be a burden to others. But when we talk about these things and they're out in the open, like me just sharing, if I put all my hopes and dreams into my spouse and they disappoint me, it can be really heavy for me. Like putting these thoughts out, these things that weigh me down, weigh my heart down, it frees me up to be more sincere and more authentic to others. Them seeing that weaker side of me. Being on the church staff, sometimes I feel like I might have to have this image, as a children's ministry director, I need to be this way. But if I could put that aside, if I feel comfortable enough to free myself up to share the things that are bothering me, people will understand me better. And in that way, they can reach out to me better and know what my needs are as a part of this community.
Yeah. I think the challenge with married people is that, again, like we live with this false expectation that we have our own community and that should be sufficient. And like we try to live into that, like fake it till you make it kind of mentality. And for so long, we might actually convince ourselves that that's enough. But what's been fascinating is with our married couples hangouts every month, with people sharing vulnerably, like the feedback we keep getting is, man, I didn't realize I was not the only one going through this. Like I didn't realize that everyone else has their own version of that thing that I've been kind of slowly but secretly carrying in my life. And that's been like this discovery and release of emotional burden that has been like laid before us. And it's almost like we're discovering together through that common vulnerability that we shouldn't have ever believed that we could do it alone. We needed to share. We needed community outside of ourselves to process that I'm not this like shameful other, that this problem or this challenge that I'm struggling with is common to us. And it humanizes the struggle. It humanizes the growth. Whereas oftentimes, like we believe there's a fairy tale to marriage. Like the wedding day is the consummation, but it's not. It's probably just the beginning. And so we need people to process that with, and married people need that, or else you feel really alone.
And I think, again, like, I think just our years of doing ministry, what I see very often, even within dating into marriage, is that it just kind of like becomes a cluster and then they disappear. And I know everyone knows what I'm talking about. Like, I'm just gonna be very real. Within church, like ministry, you watch this and you're like, I really want to have a family, like a church family. But then, when couples are dating or when they're married, like they just become their own kind of island. And I feel I can no longer touch that. I can never like get into that space. And to be honest, like I am a huge extrovert, so I'm always like, oh, like let's hang out, But it's really hard to do that when I'm approaching a couple who I know is united, like, and they're just like so together. And to be honest, I really appreciate even couples in churches when they could be separate and they know that they're doing life with other people as well. I think that really helps me because I feel like, oh, now I can gain a brother or I could gain a sister here. They're not just to each other, that during ministry, they're not always together, that they can sit in different places next to a newcomer, they don't have to always be together. During like lunchtime or like when they're hanging out, they don't always have to be together. It's as if now they're two strong people working separately, but for the same purposes of, for God. And I always found that like really hard, just seeing that when they're dating or married, that it becomes themselves and, they sit in the back together, they're giggling together, they whisper things together. And I'm like, how that would look like if I did that to all my single friends and you're sitting there watching me? You will feel very uncomfortable, So I think I would encourage people to remember or to know what that looks like. If I always whispered to my best friend and texted them and giggled or shared stuff with them, only with them, and always sat next to them, you would definitely see me as a impenetrable kind of a community within myself, And also I feel like on top of that, like, what does it look like when I can't build my character off of other people? I think when you're only like always with the other half, you're not able to build as much character, I feel.
You know, something I really appreciated when Sandy was sharing was the fact married people have a role, a very big role to play with singles especially. So when you're talking about sharing deeply with people outside of your life stage, I think it's very important for singles to kind of understand that the problems ultimately boil down to the same things, but they look a little different, right? But at the same time, when I'm listening to a married couple share deeply with me, I'm also learning, I'm also growing, I'm also able to appreciate, yes, there is difference, but there's still commonality there as well. And I think hearing that as a single person makes me feel like, okay, like we're not so different, you know? We're still able to relate, we're still able to walk through this. You know, ultimately we don't have the same exact experiences, kind of like what Dave said. There's similar experiences in that category, but they won't ultimately look the same for everyone, right? And we can appreciate that difference. And in that, we can create more of a community where we don't have to be carbon copies of each other. We don't have to struggle with the same things. We can still be together, but different in terms of our lifestyles and life stages.
And I think single people can be such a source of strength and like a pillar of community for married couples, because whereas married couples, they tend to go deep, single people love broadly, and they love in an incredibly beautiful way. And they, because they love such a spectrum of humanity, when married couples talk about like, oh, I don't know why she does this, or I don't know why he does this, a single person who loves broadly in the way of Jesus will be able to say, actually, you know, I feel like your spouse is doing this. Like I encounter this in a lot of the relationships that I have with my friends. And I've had a lot of conversations like that, where it's like, oh, maybe that's what's happening. Maybe that's what she's doing, or maybe that's what he's doing, or maybe that's what I'm doing. Thank you for that perspective. And it can really give a whole lot of perspective. Like married people really need the broader perspective of single people so that we understand even our spouses or ourselves, because they bring that perspective that we ourselves wouldn't have, because we're kind of locked within that silo oftentimes.
I completely agree. I think some of the richest insight that I've received about my marriage with my spouse came from single people, because like you said, they were able to see things from a broader perspective and also from a very neutral perspective. They didn't feel the need to side with me or side with my spouse, or not to say like all married couples do that, but I think sometimes some might feel like, oh, because she's the wife, like they understand me better because I'm the wife. But there's so much richness in the mind of a single person. Just being able to see the situation or maybe the conflict that we shared from a very neutral perspective. Yeah.
And I just want to kind of shadow what Lester was saying before about like how people who are in dating relationships or even in like marriages, they kind of silo themselves, and I see it. It's like, what's wrong with me spending all of this time with my spouse or my partner or my boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever it is. And it's like, no one's saying anything's wrong with you spending that time. But when it's that exclusive and you put up this impenetrable wall, you're teaching the rest of the community not to encroach upon that.
Don't disturb.
Yeah, don't try to scale that wall. Don't try to, go past that threshold, which means then everyone else is going to learn to respect this wall when people need that wall to be broken. Like you might be fine, but we're all learning to leave relationships like marriages and dating relationships alone. And so what about all of those people who are in those marriages that are broken? What about all of those people who are really lonely in those relationships? They're going to be left alone now because you've taught us to leave that alone. There's something about doing community together where we realize we want to encourage the best practices in everyone else, and not just think for ourselves and say, hey, this is what I want. To be mindful of, if I do this in my relationship inside of this community, what will it teach the community? It'll teach them to leave married people alone, all married people alone, and then it'll just perpetuate that kind of loneliness. How do we, hold that line and say, like, marriages matter, but at the same time, not close it off to the rest of the community and say, this really this exchange is quite important to the rest of the body.
I think our natural tendency in this culture, in the American culture, is I want to respect your time because time is money. Which is why, Lester, you said before, as a single man, I didn't want to be a burden or take away your time from your spouse or your family. Like that, I think that's our natural tendency. I think a big question in my mind is, how do we respect the single person or the married person or the parents with children? How do we respect people's time then in a healthy community? Like as you said, we want to respect the space of married people and single people. But what's the best way to go about that then?
Yeah. That's
How
a really
do we
good
respect
question,
each
Sandy.
other?
I feel like in my experience, it's been helpful that we just communicate that. Like I leave my door open. This is for the rest of the world to know, but I never lock my doors. So I think I get all people that comes in here, like anyone, and you guys seen it. And I communicate that. We have a lot of good married, like Christian brothers and sisters that are very good at inviting you into like their homes and for movie nights, like dumpling making socials or like, whatever it is. They're very good at that stuff. And I think when they communicate that, then you're kind of like, oh, I can actually cross that now because I'm here so often. I think when the closer I get with you guys, or even with Dave or with you guys, like it's very helpful to know, oh, I can just show up. Like, am I gonna show up at 4 a.m? No, but there's ring your doorbell at 4 a.m. But I feel like communication really helps. But to really break that barrier in the beginning, these barriers that we're talking about, like the second you break that, the easier it is to build community. So I do feel, yes, like there are definitely new people that we've just met. I'm not gonna just show up and hang out with them. But I do feel it goes both ways, that I would definitely invite you to go hang out, but please also invite me too, so I know how this can work. We're a family, we're a community. It's a familial living style that we're doing.
And that's exactly why we need community to begin with. Yeah. To have those people to ask, hey, am I putting up a wall that you feel, you don't feel so comfortable asking me to come out? Or, having someone that you trust to ask that question of, am I doing something that makes you feel funny, that makes you feel like you need to stay at a distance, you need to keep your distance? Or am I doing anything that makes you feel like you can't ask me out for tacos at 10 p.m. at night? Just having someone to give you a very objective response, a neutral response, to say, this is actually the truth, this is how I feel. And I don't know if everybody else feels that way, but I do see that wall, or I don't see that wall. And no, you've been great at, I feel completely welcome to ask you to hang out.
When we're thinking of that 1+1 quote, I was thinking about, the Bible says that marriage is a union between two. So you don't end up being that 1+1 equals 2, you become that first one. And then you add another 1. When we're thinking of and, right? It becomes more external now. Because once you're united with your spouse, the call then is to continue to move forward, right? We're talking about the and here. So 1 plus another 1, whatever that may look like. It could be your neighbor, it could be your coworkers, it could be your extended family members, friends, and I think that's really cool. It's actually supposed to shore up your ability to bless others, and I think that's really cool. And that's the beauty of marriage, in my opinion.
That's good. Yeah.
I would love to ask you guys, like, what you have seen in married couples that is very encouraging and really builds community. I know that we talk about also false expectations and kind of myths, but also what practical things you have seen throughout ministries that have worked. Sandy, actually, I would love to ask you, because you're married and I've known you for a big part of your life. And you as a married woman, I see how you do ministry and I see how you invite people. It's on Facebook, Instagram, it's on everything. And your husband, you're just super, communal, very good at just bringing people together. I guess I would love to ask you, one, why do you do that? How do you do it? And what do you do?
Well, before I moved back to New York City, I was living in Indonesia where I didn't have a kitchen. And it was really hard to prepare meals. And that was something that I always wanted to do. even though I didn't have like much cooking experience, it was like mainly just college ramen and eggs and ramen all day long. Knowing how it felt to not have a kitchen, to now have a place of my own, I feel like this is such a blessing that I cannot let up. I need to make good use of this and practice my cooking skills, develop my cooking skills, and bring people in because God has blessed me with a space. It would be such a shame for this space, this home, to just be my spouse's home and mine. I wanted it to be filled because I remembered what it was like to not have that. And my spouse and I have identical views on how we should use the home, which has been really encouraging for me. He believes that what we have is not really ours, and it could be tomorrow that we don't have it anymore, that we need to give it up. So if we were to give it up, and knowing that we haven't made good use of it, we haven't shared it with the people around us who could benefit from it, that would be very heavy. That would be, I think, just a poor use of the resources that God has blessed me with. And having that at the forefront of our minds, our home, I know every time we come home, we say home sweet home because of the people that have come and blessed it, the memories that were made here, the laughter that was heard. And it just fills us up to be able to share our resources and the things that make us happy with others that might not have those resources too. And I think having that mindset first, having that attitude of, yeah, this is not mine. And while I've been blessed with it now, I need to make good use of it because tomorrow it could be taken away from me or I might have to give it up. Having that at the forefront of our minds helps a lot.
I think that's so important that within what you're just sharing, I'm hearing a lot of hospitality and also generosity, knowing that, this can all be taken away, but how can I be generous with what I have that God's given me, that we are living on borrowed capital and, we're going to use it today and be hospitable with that. That's very encouraging. You're absolutely right. I think things like that we have definitely seen within our ministry and especially for married people, when they do that together, it's powerful. I actually remember that when I became a Christian was because it was a pastor and his wife that brought me in and just cooked for me. And, they would just spend their time and their money on me. And, I was a punk. Jim and Nancy just took me in and they always hung out with me.
Was?
Huh?
Was?
I was a punk. I'm not a punk now. Come on. I'm not. This guy is always causing problems, guys.
Okay.
Thank you so much for joining us for this 1+1 series on marriage. Obviously, we would love for you to talk about this with your church. When you watch these series, discuss it. It doesn't work if we don't talk about these things because we're all hoping for our churches to grow together and build community. So please join us for the next one. If you have any questions, anything you want to comment on, the links are there. Join us for our next series on parenting and the community.